everybody I think had this existential question, like, is Solana dead? Like, here are the facts. There is not a lot of liquidity, there's not a lot of volume, and the optics of what have happened are not good. So we would have this existential question of, are we still building on Solana, or are we going to figure out if we want to move somewhere else? Ultimately, we decided to build on Solana. I think we saw it as an opportunity to really double down. I think what stands out in crypto is teams that have a 10-year time horizon and are thinking about the product first, and the token as a thing it should be an afterthought, I think, to the product.
Zano,
Cool.
Thanks for coming on the podcast. Appreciate you coming over. Shout out Miami squad #1.
Cool. Thanks for having me, man.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Maybe to start off, I've known you and Lucas for some time now, and I think it's interesting just how your guys' story, and even Solana's story, for a matter of fact, you guys kind of got started in the tail end of 2021, have gone through some bear markets, and are now one of the top projects on Solana. And I think that journey, the trials, tribulations, personally, I know there's a lot of battle scars that come from that, kind of just being on the Solana roller coaster. And so I think maybe a cool spot to start the podcast would just be how Jito came about, your role as CTO, and maybe we can just start it from there.
Cool. Yeah, happy to. So I met Lucas, my co-founder, Buffalo, on Twitter. Just kind of so happened to be working on MEV. When I say working, I mean like researching, and I had just learned about MEV and sort of like the rabbit hole that it is. And Lucas was working on an idea that had to do with MEV, like an MEV DAO on Solana. And he tweeted something out looking for a partner to work on this thing. So yeah, I just kind of reached out to him, and
so be active on Twitter, more of the story.
Yeah, be active on Twitter. Also, yeah, kind of like you never know who's behind these PFPs. Like it could be a badass, kick-ass, partner that you end up starting a company with. It could go nowhere, but like shoot your shot, basically. Yeah.
So you and Lucas met on Twitter, and then how long did it take for you guys to kind of figure out what would then become Jito?
Yeah, so the actual product and the system looked a lot different when we were talking about it. It took a couple of weeks to kind of converge on what the current system is, which is this validator client that's a fork of the normal client, and like this MEV system that sits in front of that. Zooming out a little bit, the thesis was we believe MEV capture will be very important, and there will be a lot of value there to capture and redistribute to networks that are successful. So like that thesis is simple. The hard thing was like choosing what network it would be other than Ethereum.
Yeah, and I mean, it was interesting because at the time in 2020, DeFi summer just started. It was really interesting, all the experiments being run, a lot of yield farming, the food tokens going on. And then Ethereum just continued to explode in 2021. And that was really around like the PFP era, getting NFTs. And I remember very vividly, because I personally tried to get hired at other funds, that if you talked anything about anything other than Ethereum, it was really sacrilegious. And so for you guys to take a chance on a new chain outside of Ethereum, what were those kind of conversations like, and why did you end up choosing Solana?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm very much aligned with the culture that Tolly and like the core team had set originally, which is this culture of just shipping things that are useful and things that work. So like I like this engineering first approach, and I think in the limit, this is the approach that gets mass adoption. I think you just have to think about distribution and users, and that's the most important thing.
Yeah, I always appreciated the product focus instead of research. I mean, I love research, and I would say be remiss if didn't acknowledge that the Ethereum community has put out a lot of great work that has helped everybody in terms of advancing their independent research, their chains. But I very much appreciate focusing on users and actually solving the end problem. So you guys ultimately took some time, started raising in end of 2021. How that process kind of looked, because that was also a very part of the euphoric rally that was going on in 2021. Was that an easy raise? Was it a hard raise in hindsight?
Yeah, so Multicoin had led that round, and those guys really believed in us and doubled down on us. But funny thing about that time is, yeah, like you said, there was a big rally. It was just Lucas and I at the time. All we had was an entity doc and an idea and like some half-baked code, and potentially a check from Multicoin. We show up to Breakpoint and it's just us two, and like it was just like such a stark difference compared to the conferences when we go now. It's like we're just two dudes, like nobody knows us. We're just kind of like in the shadows trying to get into all these events, not getting accepted. It was a fun time though, like being able to just like grind fast.
I remember that fondly as well. The first Breakpoint was really interesting because the community, that was their first time to come together, and that was kind of just the time that I personally started getting excited about Solana. And I was like, yeah, I'm going to go to Breakpoint. And it just coincided that that was like the Pico top, but the parties were epic. And I think for me, the thing that I realized is like you were actually building something. And at that point in time, I was just doing more research and started the podcast because I wasn't getting into the parties.
Yeah. Good times, right? Like Solana's come such a long way in terms of, you want to basically, I think, build something that becomes a virus and people can't get rid of it. And you see this like with open source technologies like Node.js, Java, these things. They're not the best pieces of tech, but at the time they were serving a real use case, and they're serving it well, and they have spread like viruses. And Solana's done a great job at that.
It was interesting though, because we went through a pretty brutal bear market, starting in 2020, and really got kicked in the knees, kind of post FTX collapse. Can you talk about kind of that process as well, as someone that has built through the hype, the trough, and now kind of coming out on the other side? What was the building experience like when Solana became unpopular during the bear market?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think anyone was having fun. It was definitely hard. It was a question of, do we, everybody I think had this existential question, like, is Solana dead or will it prosper in the future? Like, and I think looking around, you see at the time we were seeing all these other builders that kind of doubled down too, and Solana didn't really. It didn't really lose that mind share. It kind of, the whole FTX thing almost made everyone band together and becomes stronger through that adversity. So like seeing that, that's like the touchy feely part, right? Like, and that's super important. I think blockchains are kind of like, they're cities, right? In that way, where you need the culture, you need the vibes, and like the tech is there. The tech is going to keep getting better.
Yeah, it was super painful. And I think I was around in 2017 as my first cycle. And at that point, everybody was dancing on Ethereum's grave because it was like, it's just for ICOs. It's only Ponzi's, Bitcoins, everything. And the fact that you did ICOs, you're going to die. And in hindsight, that was obviously wrong. Ethereum was really starting to come into its own. It just was at the beginning of that. And I think the Ethereum community really bounced back because of how much people made fun of them. And Solana kind of had a similar journey of just being ridiculed. How was that from like the building experience though? Like you guys raised this money, it was you and Lucas. I'm presumably by kind of end of 2022 or the next breakpoint, you guys had a little bit more of a team built out. Did the team ever go through any hardships of like losing faith or team members just kind of being saddened because I hear Brian and the Coinbase team always talking about like, don't get too excited during the bull markets, don't get too depressed during the bear markets. How was that for you guys?
I like to think we had a candid and very sort of like objective viewpoint on things, where it was like, here are the facts. There is not a lot of liquidity, there's not a lot of volume, and the optics of what have happened are not good. So we would have this existential question of, are we still building on Solana, or are we going to figure out if we want to move somewhere else? Ultimately, we decided to build on Solana. I think we saw it as an opportunity to really double down. And if Solana did indeed succeed, we would have been part of that cohort of teams that stuck around and doubled down and help succeed, or help Solana succeed. So like the decision was, if Solana succeeds, there's some asymmetric upside to this thing. If not, you learn.
Start another startup. And at that time, the narrative was the 75 devs. And so, yeah, it's been remarkable, because now, I mean, fast forwarding to 2023 or end of 2023, you guys started building out the product, you launched a product and started launching liquid staking. Can you talk about kind of how that product progressed from initially trying to get people to stake with you guys, volumes kind of being down and that being a bit of a challenge, and how that continued to progress throughout end of 2023 to today?
Yeah, I think, similar to a lot of these projects is the cold start problem. The MEV system had a cold start problem where you needed traders for the thing to be valuable to validators. You needed validators for the thing to actually be valuable to traders. Liquid staking was the same thing. It was like, you need liquidity for the LST to actually be valuable to stakers. You need stakers to mint for there to be any liquidity. So it was kind of like if you look at the chart, like the TVL chart, I think it's somewhat logarithmic. It's like, exponential. It's like early on, it's very hard to get TVL, and then over time, people start believing in the asset more. I think LSTs are similar to stablecoins, and where, yeah, the yield matters, but when you're talking about a few basis points relative to others, there's other things that matter. And it's like the touchy-feely part that I was talking about is like, you need some brand equity for this thing to be viewed as like pristine collateral.
And do you feel like that was primarily just built throughout the bear market, kind of being one of the teams that stuck with it and continued to double down on Solana? Or like what other advice would you give to startups kind of going through that cold start problem, being like, what the fuck am I doing? Beating your head against the wall, trying to figure out what you need to do.
Yeah, distribution's the hardest. I mean, you want to get I think it's, sometimes we get nerd sniped into mechanisms and sort of all the back end interesting engineering stuff, and then forget about the actual end user. And so like, along with providing higher yields, specifically with what Jito did with the LST, it was also just getting it in people's faces. Like, hey, there's this LST product. It's useful because there's liquidity, and just really like going through the cycle of like, all right, get more users, incentivize liquidity, get more users, incentivize liquidity. And then now it's kind of, there's 11.8 million SOL in the LST pool.
Yeah. It's super damn impressive. Yeah. Congrats, man.
Thanks.
It's not easy. I always say it's, in hindsight, it's much easier, but the decisions and everything that went into it, even deciding to start Jito, is very hard. It is not easy to build on crypto.
No, it's not, because many reasons. Crypto's just, it's not like a traditional company. You're giving away tokens to public people, to the public, and you got to figure out, like, everybody people can get lost in the sauce where they're launching tokens just to pump valuation or maybe have easy liquidity. I think what stands out in crypto is teams that have a 10-year time horizon and are thinking about the product first, and the token as a thing it should be an afterthought, I think, to the product.
It should supplement the product, but not be the product itself.
Yeah.
It is interesting. Some teams, I think, do get distracted, and I think that's also VC's fault. The more that I've kind of peered behind the curtain, being on the VC side, I've learned a lot, and I kind of understand some of the reason why people do that. But I'm looking very much for more product focus builders, because I think that is where the industry is also like heading to. Maybe shifting slightly, appreciate all the background context on you and Jito and how the company kind of started and some of the trials and tribulations. As the CTO, maybe you start off with what the fuck is MEV and why it kind of happens. There's lots of debates on MEV. It's more popular now, kind of more widely known, but maybe in your own words, what is MEV and what are you guys doing with it?
Yeah, I would say MEV is an emergent property of any public distributed ledger, i.e. any public blockchain with a smart contract platform. And I would describe MEV as the value that is up for grabs, not necessarily actually realized, but up for grabs, the potential value that's up for grabs based on different sequencing of events or transactions. So what Jito's MEV system does, the block engine, it tries to give searchers and traders more expressivity over where they can land in a block, and searchers are willing to pay a premium to get that expressivity.
And I think there's maybe many ways to take that. It's interesting how kind of blocks are coming together with leaders, and those leaders can ultimately kind of have God mode, if you will, over the block when they're proposing the block, or if they can construct the block. Can you talk about maybe how those MEV opportunities arrive, or you can ultimately potentially move transactions around to extract MEV?
Yeah, so like a specific example is, let's say, and I don't endorse any tokens I talk about. Let's say a whiff trade comes in. Some user fat fingers a whiff trade on Radium. Fat finger meaning like they just buy an ass ton of that token, and the way the AMM curve works is it moves the price up. Mm-hmm. And now the price is high relative to, let's say, Coinbase, relative to another DEX on the chain, and potentially like even cross chain. But specifically on Solana, let's say like Orca, now the price is lower on Orca and it's higher on Radium. So there's some MEV there. The MEV there is the difference in price times total amount of that token that you can buy to get the price to converge to each other. So then searchers will come in and they'll buy from the lower DEX, which is Orca in this example, and they'll go sell into the Radium pool, and eventually the prices will converge. So what they've captured a spread there between the difference in price. That's the MEV, and then a piece of that MEV is going to be tipped to Jito. Jito then so like everybody's competing for this, right? So people are competing on the tips. Jito tries to probabilistically determine what the highest paying bundles are, and all the value from these bundles go to validators and their stakers.
In your words, how do you think about, like, there was obviously a lot of learnings from Ethereum and how MEV evolved in the Ethereum landscape, but how is that different in Solana world, and being able to utilize Jito, learn from those lessons, and kind of adapt to Solana architecture?
Yeah. So the thing that makes Solana super interesting, and I feel like this isn't talked about enough, is the streaming nature of the block propagation. So you can think of Solana's block propagation and block building as sort of like continuous time. So the way that works is, as a validator is receiving transactions for a block, they immediately execute it, sign it, and stream that out to the rest of the network. And they're constantly doing that in a stream-like fashion. And then so a block is basically this start and end of a stream, versus on Ethereum and most other networks, the validator builds, or the leader builds, the block entirely and then signs the block header and propagates that out to the network. So it's like so this streaming versus batching makes things super interesting. So back to how that affects the way the system is built. It just means the state of the world is constantly changing from under you. So the blockchain is a moving target. Bundles are coming in, trying to change state on this blockchain, right? And we're trying to simulate these bundles and figure out what they're tipping and how these state changes actually manifest. It just makes it a super hard engineering problem because of the streaming nature.
It is interesting just because MEV, when I think about it historically on Ethereum, if you could theoretically only update your worldview every 12 seconds, 12 seconds doesn't seem like a lot of time towards normal people, but if you're trading or doing arbitrage, 12 seconds is a really long time traditionally, even compared when you're trading in like microseconds or nanoseconds for kind of the high frequency trading firms. And then Solana kind of comes in and changes that, and it's almost, because the block times are 400 milliseconds, but they're always kind of like streaming blocks. I'm sure that's a very difficult engineering problem.
Yeah, because like concretely, the block engine simulates a bundle on on like what it believes to be the latest state. But while it's simulating that bundle, the actual state is changing, and so the results yielded from simulation don't always equal the results of when they actually land on chain. So yeah, it's a super interesting problem. It's kind of like why I'm interested in it.
So maybe talk a little bit about how you guys, part of it's that simulation process. How are you guys ultimately working through that from an engineering point of view?
Yeah, so you want the fastest inputs into your system. Inputs are basically where's the chain, and you're inputting that into RPC servers. So you need that as fast as possible. So your RPC servers or simulation servers are up to date. And then you also want the fastest outputs into the chain. So inputs into RPC servers and outputs out of the system into the blockchain, just to minimize the discrepancy of the state changes between simulation and landing. So it's like a lot of like low-level optimizations, architectural optimizations, and it's a moving target problem.
Yeah, it is hard. I'm curious. Have you guys had to change the architecture design, or have you guys generally feel like you got that kind of like directionally cracked as volumes have kind of increased?
Yeah, I think if you look at the system's performance today relative to, let's say, December even, completely different. Like a lot of things were learned along the way, just like low level techniques. Maybe the architecture has broadly stayed the same, but it's sort of how like the internal thing works, and just like better software engineering practices and just like learning along the way.
Interesting. So I guess going maybe like a little bit deeper into like Jito's technical stack, what do you find the most interesting as you've kind of continued to spearhead it? Obviously the simulation problem is very hard. You have searchers kind of submitting these bundles. What do you find the most intellectually interesting?
I think just looking at searcher behavior and how they're trying to game the system is interesting. They're like, I don't like that people try to game the system, but at the same time, it's you have to be thinking adversarially when you're building these things. That's been interesting. Digging through the data and seeing sort of what trades are happening, what are searchers interested in. I think like the whole meme coin cycle, people like to downplay it, but it really has spread crypto adoption and like has proven PMF. And we're seeing a lot of that manifest through the block engine and the MEV system.
Yeah, I mean, I think I looked, it was like 80 or 90% of Solana volumes were specifically around meme coins. And I think it's super bullish, but I'm also like, I want to figure out like how we can get stocks and equities, like Forex, like more trading volumes on chain as well.
Yeah, I kind of agree with you there. I'm curious what your thesis is on getting stocks and equities on chain as opposed to like just a world where everything's just 100% tokens.
I mean, I would like equities to be tokenized. This kind of goes down the rabbit hole of I think if like Tolly's vision ultimately is achieved, you have like the multiple leaders that are able to kind of submit transactions closest to you. Those leaders are able to somehow thread together transactions to build blocks. It is really interesting from like an MEV arbitrage. Tolly's example always has been like there's a newsworthy event in Japan and an earthquake, like theoretically that trade should happen in Japan with the leader in Japan before it makes its way through fiber optics to New York. And to me, like I can picture that reality playing out, which is kind of exciting. And I think generally why I get excited about these ecosystems is because I actually think it's a better way to do finance. Whether it's like wire transfers, giving people access to bank accounts or credit through borrow lend, the exact mechanics of like how we get like regulations to get equities on chain, I'm not exactly sure, but I can squint and see how it happens, at least directionally, which makes me excited.
Yeah, and it gives companies and sort of like the issuance of these things, it's a lot more transparent, it's a lot easier to do. I think things are just more public. People have access to the stuff in a public way.
Yeah. I mean, it's just remarkable to me even now with just meme coins how much the volumes increase though.
Yeah. What do you think that is? What do you think that's a signal of?
Of like Solana or just like overall?
Like the world.
It's a little,
like, what does this say about the current world we live in?
I mean, like my personal feelings is I'll speak for me personally. I had to take a lot of risks to just be in the spot that I am. And I think economically you have to kind of take some punts. And that's really hard to do, either career-wise or investing-wise. You kind of have to be right to kind of get yourself out of the system, unfortunately. I kind of did that by joining Tesla fairly early. My Tesla stock did decently well while I was there. I got into crypto during 2017, really fell down the Ethereum rabbit hole and kind of kept with it when Ethereum was around $100. So there's like these opportunities and I think windows for people to capitalize on, but there's many reasons. Public companies not going public or going later and later, people kind of not having that upside combined with inflation. I don't know. To me, it kind of makes me a little bit sad on where we are today, just because you kind of have to gamble a little bit. And I can see why people want to speculate on meme coins. To me, I don't know. I wish we could kind of fix it with like, this is why outside of meme coins, I'm excited about tokenization, because potentially this is a way for companies to quote unquote go public. And instead of having $1 billion in ARR to just like meet the minimum threshold to go public, you can launch your token. The token does well or does not do well, but just as a different way to kind of create value in the world.
Yeah, I mean, and I think this is where you start to see the cracks in the current regulatory environment, is like there's this new system of potentially launching equities, of doing finance, and we have this old legacy regulation system trying to govern that. I'm pretty bullish on a deregulation super cycle in the next decade.
I would be bullish. It makes me sad just how much money we have to spend on legal fees.
Yeah. It's the hidden tax, right? Nobody had told us about this. And
it's ridiculous. And like, I would love for the US to be supportive of crypto companies. And it does seem like with the new regime possibly coming in, we may get a pro crypto president, which will be refreshing.
Yeah, like even more broadly, let's be pro innovation and not scared of radical technologies. I think something that I've heard chatter about, I don't think the US government broadly fully recognizes this, is that crypto is spreading US dollar more than probably most things they've ever tried. It's getting US dollars into like the world's hands in these emerging economies. Everybody who's trading meme coins is probably doing it denominated in USDC. So it's like really proliferating the US dollar, and that's something that needs to be highlighted. And I think really like I'd like to see more research on that.
It was interesting. I just went to New York and talked with the team that is creating Agora. They're building a new stable coin that's going to share yield with either application engineers or people that integrate with them. Because I think people don't really realize how much stablecoins print. Like they're one of the most profitable businesses right now, especially because how high the treasury yields are. Like Tether is making billions a quarter. And Agora is kind of this new stablecoin that's coming about that is going to share that yield back with applications that use the Agora stablecoin or people that integrate it, kind of sharing in some of the revenues, so to speak. And yeah, but to your point, the stablecoins are massive because you need someone to like buy these treasuries and people want to hold US dollars generally just because it's a better quote unquote stable coin than their local currency, which either has higher inflation than the US does or just like normally inflation risk. But it is crazy.
Yeah, I mean it'll be interesting to see how the next 10-20 years play out in these emerging markets, with stable coins, with more digitization, with more just like general remote work, and just generally like in jobs converging more onto like the digital front. Would like to see, like I'm pretty, people who know me personally know I'm pretty bullish South America, so it'll be interesting to see how it plays out.
The world is becoming increasingly global. People work from wherever. Once we're in our metaverse and VR headset, we'll all just maybe be holding USDC or Bitcoin. It'll be interesting. But maybe like jumping off that vein, how do you kind of see kind of this blockchain architecture? What is the end state, whether from like the MEV side or Firedancer, newer chains, Monad? How do you see like all these Ethereum L2s, L3s? How do you see this future kind of playing out?
I think it'll be largely winner takes most. You only have so much volume that you can spread around these different ecosystems. I think specifically to Solana, the interesting things that Tolly talks about and that I see in the SIMD repo is asynchronous execution. John Sharp had this quote in one of his recent posts where I might butcher this, but it was sequencing tells the truth and then executing is what reveals the truth. Which is it was interesting to put into perspective. It's like consensus doesn't need to come to consensus on the state change as long as we're all running the same virtual machine. we will come to that state change, the exact state change. We just need to come to consensus on the sequencing of the ordering of these events. So get execution out of the hot path. I think that's so like Solana innovated on the block streaming that we were talking about earlier. I think the next innovation for blockchains is this asynchronous execution.
Yeah, when I did my podcast with Toli in San Francisco, I think like a year ago, he was very excited about asynchronous execution because I think from his days in Qualcomm and just like GPUs and how many cores they have, he was like, look, if we did asynchronous execution once per epoch, theoretically we could like pre-fetch all the transaction IDs, or I'm probably butchering this as well, but have it in memory, do like one transaction batch per epoch, and it would save a lot of time. And essentially what you're coming to consensus on is just the fork choice.
Yeah, exactly. The fork choice and exactly. And like within the fork choice, what the ordering of things are within these blocks. The broader vision, I think, is to make the validator a little lighter. You don't need to be running super beefy nodes to run a validator. RPCs are probably going to be running beefier nodes because they want that data immediately. They want the end state of that transaction immediately.
Shout out Mert and beefy nodes.
Yeah, Mert's a big beefy node guy.
Yeah, I definitely think asynchronous execution. I'm bullish multiple leaders, even though it's probably a little bit further away for Solana, just in how it kind of reduces latency, like AWS versus AWE East. Maybe like from your point of view, being very deep on the client side, have you guys gotten to dive deeper into some of the things that the Fire Dancer team is doing, and if so, kind of thoughts around that and how it's progressing are going to change Solana ecosystem?
Yeah, I think I really like Fire Dancer teams, and this might be a broader thing at Jump. They're like first principles approach to building software, where they're thinking about the hardware that the software is running on. I think that has kind of unlocked something for me mentally going forward when I'm thinking about building systems. Like basically the way I understand it is you have this logical grouping of functions that you want your thing to run. Each function is potentially CPU heavy, and just pin it to a core and have it be as fast as damn possible to do the task at hand. And if you have 64 cores, you have 64 really compute heavy functions doing things without any interrupts, without any OS interrupts and context switching.
Yeah, the Fire Dancer team is pretty cracked on trying to understand the physics and how big the die is to send light. They're like, speed of light is too damn slow.
Yeah, I mean, so like before Jito, I was doing a lot of like web dev, data, indexers, things like this. And you don't need to think about this stuff when you're doing that stuff. You're not thinking at the same scale, and you don't have the same optimization problems, and it's fine. Like that, the way the Fire Dancer team is approaching what they're doing is probably the worst way to start a startup. Doing some like consumer facing thing, call it like the next Uber, because the go-to-market is just treacherous and it's a lot of blood, sweat, and tears. But I think when you're building a blockchain, especially when you're the second client, you have a little bit of the luxury to kind of take your time and do it the right way, and do things better.
One of the early ethoses of kind of blockchain communities is you should have multiple redundant clients. I think Solana kind of famously had some issues with its early client and just some bugs that ultimately arose through 2022 and 2023. Now it's actually been semi-stable, knock on wood.
Find some wood.
Yeah. But has your kind of point of view on like multiple clients, do you think that's bullish? Do you think it kind of slows things down?
I think there's a number of different clients where if you get to this number, it's actually not good. It's net negative. I don't know what that number is. It's probably not. 2's probably good. 4 is probably like, maybe you don't need 4, because like now you're spreading talent across 4 different, versus if you had everyone just focused on 2 things or 1 thing, that thing will compound and get better. I think the slowing down, yeah, like things are slowing down. I think it's just a sign of Solana maturing. You have more things at stake. There's more money at stake. It's securing a lot more value, and it's probably good.
What would you like to see more of in the Solana ecosystem, either on research, apps?
I think historically I've thought the research is probably lacking a little bit. It's been refreshing to see that get picked up, and see more researchers from other communities come in and be interested to look into things. I think Solana, I think you could always, you should always be building more apps and try to figure out what things should get PMF. I think we have that culture. So I'd like to just see that get doubled down on.
Yeah. It is interesting. I feel like some of the undertones that I've seen the last like 6 months, I'm very curious to see if Solana kind of continues to gain market share and price adoption, kind of comparative to Ethereum. And because it feels like at least my observation is that Ethereum is obviously still king of the smart contract platforms today, but that kind of attention economy, so to speak, is not there. It's more so on Solana and perhaps some L2s. And so it's interesting because kind of some of the earlier thought leaders, as that kind of power dynamic shift over to Solana, it's now creating some of these bashes, which I see on Twitter, and as we kind of come to head.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good sign for Solana, is nobody's bashing some of these other chains, even if they have high market caps. Like nobody's even thinking about them.
That's true.
Yeah.
Let's shift to Miami.
Yeah.
You, I think, were in another part of the world, but then moved to Miami. And now there's a really awesome community. You guys, Drift is here. Some people, a couple other funds have been here as well. A couple other teams in the Solana ecosystem. I think we're both trying to make Miami kind of a crypto hub. It's a beautiful place to live and enjoy, and also a good place for engineering. So maybe talk about some of the things you're doing down here on the Miami side.
Yeah, I think moving to Miami right now is like buying Bitcoin in 2009 or 10.
Bullish.
Yeah, there's definitely been, you're seeing a lot more influx in talent and capital, I think. So we want to, Chris from Drift, Justin from Dead King Society, and myself we've started a nonprofit where the mission is basically to spread adoption and knowledge about decentralized technologies. One of the ways we're going to achieve that goal is by launching a co-working space out here in Wynwood. It's going to be called The Port, where shippers go to ship.
I love it.
Yeah, so that'll be opening up here soon in August, and it'll be great. I think it'll be sort of a magnet to get more builders to come out here, more engineering talent to come out here, and I think it'll be like one of those liquidity begets liquidity type situations where the more people that come, the stronger the gravitational pull will be.
Yeah. No, I mean, I've been surprised. I moved to Miami in 2021, and kind of post-COVID, a lot of people did end up moving back to kind of New York, but there was a really strong group that stayed, and now more people are just moving here to not escape New York, but just be here full time. And I think whether it's the capital allocators, the engineers, having that port or kind of central liquidity point is super helpful. And so I'm really bullish on you guys doing that, because as much as like the remote work can be nice, it can also be kind of lonely, and shipping with other people is also super beneficial.
Yeah, it was. So I think when you look at New York, you look at SF, they have this culture ingrained, their own cultures, which are awesome cultures and just completely different vibes. And they've been around for a while. I see Miami as sort of on the come up there. Miami obviously has been popular in different contexts for like its party scene and different types of things in the 80s up until recently. But now it's like you said, like there's more builders coming. So I think everybody that's here right now and coming in the near future, we're kind of defining the direction of this place. And an engineer of mine, I was talking about this to him, and he summed it up perfectly for me. He said something along the lines of like, the world is not just a phenomenon. Like, people have to do things to shape things and like get things going. And I think that's what we're all trying to do here.
It doesn't automatically happen. You gotta push it and will it into existence.
Yeah, you gotta create Excel spreadsheets. And
no, I do love it, because I think Miami, when I think of it historically, I thought you just come to here to party, but it's actually a beautiful place to live. Lots of sunshine. I think, especially as an engineer, maybe my shilling point to you outside of the port is just we spend so much time on the computer. 10, 12 plus hours a day. And I personally just really enjoy going outside and it being sunny and being nice, being able to go to the beach.
Yeah. People under index on the sun.
Yeah.
I think it's so important.
You feel better, you work more, your clarity of thought is much better.
Yeah.
And so all bullish things.
Disclaimer, we are both investors in Miami.
Yes. Cool, man. Well, I really appreciate you kind of walking us through Jito's history, sharing more kind of on just your general thoughts on kind of where the industry is headed, and also talking about Miami and the port. As we kind of wrap up, is there anything else that you kind of want to explicitly touch on or call out?
I just like, to all the founders and teams out there building a product, just focus on your customers and really don't build in a vacuum. Don't lose sight of what your goal is, which is to solve a problem and make your customers happy.
Talk to customers.
Yeah.
Awesome. Cool. Well, thank you, Zano. Appreciate it.
Cool. Thanks, man.